Welcome to episode 44 of the FusionCast. Pete and I are very pleased to be joined today by Joshua Kim. Josh, do you prefer Joshua or Josh, or do you care?
It's usually Joshua when I'm in trouble. So
I always like to ask because, we want to be sensitive to the proper etiquette. So cool. So Josh is a member of the PM team from the software group for the data and AI group. And Josh has been working very closely with us lately on a lot of the messaging and a lot of the kind of joint go-to-market and the joint offering that we're putting together with watsonx.data, and also with the DB2 warehouse. So he's been very instrumental in the messaging and kind of the joint offering value proposition that we've been developing around HCI. So he's been a great resource and a great asset to the team. So Josh, thanks for taking a few minutes to join us today. So I thought what we could do today, and as with most of these episodes, it's not super onerous. It's meant to be just kind of a casual discussion. I wanted to get your perspective on the solutions that we're bringing to market or are trying to bring to market to the data and AI customer base. So specifically focused around, again, watsonx.data, as well as DB2 warehouse. So you've shared a lot of really valuable insights in terms of what customers who are currently DB2 warehouse customers, Cloud Pak for Data customers who are now sort of migrating towards watsonx.data. Give us kind of the pain points or the primary requirements that you're hearing from that customer base.
Sure thing, Randy. I've been in the appliance world for most of my career, right? That's kind of where I started in PM. I did Sailfish appliances, PDOA, Netezza, over the years. And the pain point's always the same, right? If you look at time to value, on commodity hardware, more often than not, it takes a lot of configuring and setup time just to get right? And we've experienced that in a lot of our custom deployments. Mm-hmm. And having an appliance form factor kind of gets through that, red tape. If you look at who we deal with traditionally, it's usually the business units. It's not like an infrastructure manager, right? So trying to get a business unit executive or a line executive who does like the business analysis to understand hardware is very, very difficult. So an appliance really abstracts that, right? It makes it a lot simpler to talk to, simpler to install, right? So that's advantage one. Mm-hmm. The second is performance. Right. The warehouse appliances really took off because they were much more performant than commodity hardware, right? They were tuned to that hardware. They were designed for that hardware, configured, pre-configured for performance on that hardware. So, performance of these queries has always been also very, very important. Yeah. In fact, in most of our POCs that we do with Netezza, there's not much else they can look for. It's how quickly can you install, how fast can you run the query. That's literally been it.
Yeah. So given that as kind of the domain of requirements within the customer base, that was what kind of brought us together in the first place, working together across the teams to develop a solution based on, predominantly the Fusion HCI appliance as a way to address those needs, right? And we think it's a good fit for all those reasons. It's obviously an appliance, right? So it's pre-integrated, it's easy to get up and running. The time to value is addressed pretty directly and succinctly, and it also performs really well. Can you share a little bit of the feedback? I mean, I know we throw numbers around, but I know you've been involved in some of the early, kind of performance benchmarking we've done with the Fusion HCI appliance. Can you give us a little feedback on that?
Sure thing. And let me actually start with so storage technology becomes much more important, especially as you get into watsonx.data. Okay. Mm-hmm. And just to explain why, if you look at the architecture of watsonx.data versus a regular warehouse, in a warehouse, the compute and storage were tightly coupled, right? So, there wasn't that much needed from a storage layer. Like we built that into kind of the warehouse performance. Okay. As we get into a data lake house architecture and data lakes, more often than not, the storage is always going to be remote, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a complete separation of compute and storage. So when you apply that concept apply that challenge to some of our customer base, and I started getting this ask from a lot of these clients, what storage should I use? Hey, my network's not that great. Like, how can you help us? Like, well, I'm not getting the performance that I need. And that's where a lot of the storage technology that IBM has is really, really powerful, right? It's also technology that most of the other database vendors do not have, right? So as we get into this big data space, the storage technology and the architecture become increasingly much more important. Okay. And to show you some of that, right? I'm going to give three examples, right? Three POCs that we've run. Can't name the clients, but in one POC that we ran, I think for DB2 performance, we saw about a 4x performance gain over the current Sailfish boxes, right? So if you consider the price, which has remained flat, it's a 4x price performance gain. Beautiful story. For watsonx.data, we've had a couple of POCs leveraging Fusion ACI. And in one scenario, we saw about a 9x performance gain. And that's where we leverage the Spectrum Fusion's caching or storage acceleration technology in lieu of the Raptor X caching technology that watsonx.data natively uses. So we saw about a 9x performance gain in that scenario, which is amazing, right? Even more amazing, we did a POC with the IBM CIO's office, who currently use Starburst Trino today. And in that POC, we replaced that with Fusion ACI in conjunction with watsonx.data, and they saw a 90x performance gain. Okay.
Wow.
So, and that use case, they're reading data from remote sources, distributed globally, right? And Trino does offer basic virtualization, but when the Presto engine in watsonx.data in conjunction with the Storage Fusion storage acceleration, 90x performance gain. That is what client?
Yeah, that is a headline number, no question. That's something we can definitely tell. So Pete, I was telling Josh before you joined, when we spoke to Vasily Tarsov a few weeks back, he shared some very similar experiences. He was involved with that CIO situation. So you can share some of your thoughts from that discussion as well. I think they line up well.
Yeah, and if I recall back to that conversation, we talked about the same thing that Josh just brought up around, the tight coupling of compute and storage of the past, and how that worked, back in 2018, before that period, but like it's not working today. And as Josh talked about architecture, like I really resonated with what he was saying, because what's unique, and Randy, you asked me, like, what about Fusion HCI? Like, what's really unique here? And it's our architecture. But it's on a couple of different layers. And let me explain that. First and foremost, we use distributed storage, right? Versus share nothing storage, where you're bottlenecked, on the performance that you're going to get. And it's well proven. There's all kinds of benchmarks. I worked on these at Red Hat, 2018 to 2021 when I was there. We published these benchmarks, and we showed, that the traditional data analytics Hadoop architectures just can't perform, let alone, all of the investment, the return on investment that you get by going to a decoupled architecture where you can decouple storage and compute. So that's one piece of the story. And there's all kinds of benchmark reports that we can, show to people who show, that we can deliver these performance gains. That's largely dealing with like local, on-prem types of installations. But Josh has an excellent point also, and this is actually one of the reasons I came to IBM a year ago, is this acceleration technology is cool stuff, guys, and it's all based upon, what was spectrum scale, now storage scale, but it's like, this stuff is like incredible in terms of what it's able to do and be able to cache data on a global basis, and do it in a coherent way also. That's the other key point. And so I think these two layers, at the more fundamental, architectural layer, the distributed storage really delivers a lot of benefits, but also the acceleration, that we've introduced into the watsonx.data product. I mean, these are game changers for what we're doing in this entire space with watsonx and, with DB2.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Pete.
One closing point. I mean, this, Randy, because when we first started working, when I was at Red Hat, we did a bunch of DB2 benchmarks. Showed how we blew the doors off, of the performance. Yeah. So everything that Josh is saying is like, it's totally backed by a lot of, benchmark reports and a lot of physical evidence. This isn't just us saying this.
Yeah. And I think You mentioned something important as well, and Josh, we've talked about this as well. There's also kind of a trend, predominantly in regulated industries, to sort of repatriate things back on-prem from public cloud too, right? So whether it's for sovereignty or security or performance or cost or whatever. So I think that's another industry macro trend that we can leverage and exploit with HCI plus watsonx.data. I mean, is that something you're seeing as well, Josh?
I wouldn't say repatriate, but hybrid cloud is dominant. Okay. And in almost every conversation, there's often a data lake on-prem. Some of the smaller warehouses, might be in the cloud, but for the most part, most of the data for most of these enterprises is still on-prem, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, there's some data coming back, absolutely, and for all the reasons that you say, but I would actually assert that most of that data it never left, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
You've got the data gravity problem, and you've got the data sovereignty and the security problem too, that they're trying to deal with.
And if you look at and let's talk about Ceph storage for a second, because I think we need to kind of emphasize this better. I mean, it's the number one enterprise object storage on-prem, just behind the cloud vendors. It's the most used. I mean, I actually didn't know that until a few weeks back, but
I didn't either, actually.
But I think we should be emphasizing Ceph as the premier data lake storage, right? Even independent of watsonx.data, because remember, watsonx.data doesn't actually own any storage. It's always going to be bring your own storage, right? So there is definitely potential there for us to play in that space as well, right? So let's prove out how Ceph is the best storage for data, right?
Yeah, and Pete and I talk about this all the time. We're constantly revising messaging because messaging is never done. It's always kind of a work in progress or an evolving, an evolving thing, a living thing. And we're pretty confident that we can go to the marketplace and to our customer base and our channel with a unique full stack solution that really nobody else can offer. The closest analogs are probably the kind of apex public cloud providers, but they despite in Amazon's case, like 2 decades of trying, they still haven't been able to really plant their flag on-prem, right? So there is still this whole element of on-prem, the importance of on-prem, which doesn't go away. And if anything, it's increasing again in some industries. So we think we're really well positioned. So we're incredibly excited about kind of bringing what we're doing together with what's happening in watsonx. Put on your kind of, I don't know, or look into the crystal ball. Give us a sense for, as watsonx.ai and governance roll out, on the heels of watsonx.data, how do you see that impacting some of the messaging, some of the offerings we're taking to the market, and some of the customer requirements that we'll be able to meet?
I don't think governance is going to affect, let's say, storage directly, right? But governance is always a part of the solution, right? The ability to discover and catalog not only structured data but unstructured data, which becomes much more increasingly important as you get into the big data space, right? And I don't see this as separate solutions, but just expected capabilities of the solution. Like, it's becoming table stakes. That's what I'm kind of getting at, right? So we have Watson Knowledge Catalog that does some of this, but if you look at every cataloging solution, it's incomplete, right? It does some things well, but there's always gaps, right? WKC is excellent to be the catalog of catalogs for business terms, knowledge graphs, that kind of stuff, right? But there's also a technical metadata element, which we handle from a watsonx.data set, right? I think storage also has the discovery technologies as well to do some of this, at the storage layer, right? And I think more often than not, we forget that we forget that we need to look for efficiency, right? There are definitely some things that are going to be better or more efficiently done at the storage layer. And I'm even thinking of things like access controls, right? Probably much more efficient than trying to do at the software layer, right? So I think it depends on client choice and what they implement. One of our advantages is that we have the ability to do a full stack solution so that we can control every layer and make sure they work in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah, good point. Really good point. And I think, again, we talked about this with Vasily, and we've been talking about it internally. ChatGPT and other kind of generative AI technologies kind of brought generative AI kind of to the masses, kind of overnight almost in many ways. It was kind of an explosive phenomenon. And now enterprises are quickly catching on and catching up and trying to figure out how best to exploit generative technology without stepping into a lot of the potholes and pratfalls that come along with, risk and security concerns and inherent coded bias and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think, again, from a timing to market perspective, we, IBM, broadly speaking, are really well positioned. I mean, I think we've got a solution that's going to be very appealing to the enterprise. We're obviously an established brand within the enterprise, trustworthy, kind of able to do business within highly regulated industries, government agencies, whatever. So, we're stoked about this. I mean, I think that's what I'm saying ultimately. My last question for you, Josh, and I'll ask Pete to chime in, is your sellers have a lot of options, right? So customers that are moving from maybe DB2 Warehouse or trying to, we obviously want to retain them as DB2 Warehouse customers. Those that are maybe moving to Cloud Pak for Data, those who are moving into a watsonx.data. There's, obviously public cloud offerings. As you said, it's always going to be bring your own storage. What's the compelling argument to lead with, for example, HCI and Ceph versus some of those other options? Like, how would you position those as lead with offerings?
Great question. Let me actually start with the AI angle, because I actually think that's going to become a key battleground for us. Right? And I'm going to say most of the clients that I've worked with who are on this AI journey, I'd say the big bulk of them are still very, very early on. There's not a lot of enterprises who've been able to really get going in the AI space, and they're looking for help. Okay, but for the ones that have gotten started, okay, they don't want this to be in the cloud, and let me explain why. There's a client I worked with recently, and they were playing with ChatGPT in the cloud, right? And they had no control over what was exposed, and some of their confidential engineering plans got exposed online. Okay.
Oops. Yeah.
So they've made a conscious decision to do AI only on-prem, by the way, right? So that I heard that entire division was fired, and now they're restanding up the team because it was actually some very critical stuff, right? So
career-ending move. Yeah.
So
for a whole team.
I actually think for a lot of these large enterprises, their AI efforts will be focused on-prem. Okay. And that's where a lot of their data is still, right? And training your own models on good data is always going to be very difficult, right? So if you don't want to deal with that kind of security lapse, right? Which the cloud vendors are saying it's locked down and stuff, but the problem with AI is nobody actually knows how it actually works. So I can just go dig up and find data and expose it without even knowing, right?
Right.
So I think they want that controlled environment to make sure such things don't happen.
Yeah, really good, really interesting. And yeah, there's definitely, we talk to customers and like AI FOMO is definitely a thing. It's like they think everybody else is doing it and they don't want to get left behind. So Pete, parting thoughts, final question for you.
Yeah, I think, as I've been thinking about this, I think it's the breadth of the solution we deliver. You're not going to get that with anything else. When you think about virtual machines and containers running together, coexisting, but then you start thinking about the data services layer that has to support all that and being able to support the VMs and backing up the VMs and, doing disaster recovery, Metro DR, regional DR for both containers and VMs. We're the one company that has that solution. There's nobody out there who is as good at delivering these capabilities and it's kind of back to what Josh said about, the hybrid cloud. And it's an overloaded term in the industry right now because it can mean a lot of different things. And I think, people are running VMs today. They want to get to containers. They got public cloud. They're on-prem. There's all these multiple dimensions to it. And we've built a solution that solves all of those problems for them. So to me, I'm really excited because yes, we can talk about the data analytics all day long and the AI and data side of this and ChatGPT. We've also built an optimized platform to be able to deliver on all of that. So really excited.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about the integration benefits that come along with HCI for other OpenShift applications. So if the customer happens to have ancillary applications in OpenShift, which many do, it's a pretty pretty salient discussion to say, you can push all of those onto, and especially with hosted control planes coming out in the next release, it becomes a very, very flexible and very adaptable platform for, non-AI workloads as well. So cool.
Exactly.
All right. Well, this was a great discussion. Josh, thank you so much for your time. We know you're super busy. We appreciate your taking a few minutes, and thanks for your ongoing and great collaboration. Thanks everybody for watching. We will be back next week. There will be another special episode next week, surprise episode probably a little earlier in the week on this topic as well. So stay tuned for that one. And otherwise, we will wrap it up from there. So Josh, again, thanks very much. Pete, thanks. And everyone, we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, everybody.